Welcome to Introduction to States. After watching this video, you'll be able to explain the use of states in class components, explain the use of props in class components, compare and contrast states and props. States allow you to change data in an application. In class components, the state object includes key value pairs that specify different types of data you want to track in the application. React class components have a built-in state object. You can store property values that belong to the component in the state object. A change in the state object re-renders the component. React components have two types of state in an application, local and shared. Local states live in a single component and cannot be accessed by other components. A component that shows and hides information would use a local state. A shared state can be accessed and changed by more than one component. A list of orders in an ordering application would likely be a shared state. A class component state is a plain JavaScript object used by React to represent information about the component's current situation. The heart of every React component is its state. States determine how a component renders and behaves. A state allows you to create dynamic and interactive components. In class components, the state is an instance of the component class with a set of observable properties. These properties control the behavior of the component. You manage and preserve the state in the React component. In other words, you control the state of a component with an object that contains information that may change over the component's lifecycle. If your component changes or needs to change during user interaction, you use its state. A state allows you to track the change in the component. This includes updates to forms, buttons, and timers. For example, consider a simple application with a button and a counter. When the user presses the button, the counter variable increases by 1. As the count changes, you hold that value in the state. This code example shows how you can create a test component that contains the state with attributes such as ID, name, and age. The component's render function returns the state attribute's name and age. Props is short for properties. You use props to pass data between components. React's data between components flows from parent to child only. Props are read-only components. Prop objects store the value of attributes of a tag and work like the HTML attributes. They behave like arguments to functions that you can pass from one component to another. Props are immutable and cannot be modified from inside the component. If a variable gets modified during a process, it should belong to the component state. You can also use props to allow child components to access methods defined in the parent component. You should manage the state in the parent component. The child component does not have a state of its own. Let's look at an example with props. This code creates a class named testComponent that extends the React component. It renders props that accept the name attribute. Then, you can pass props to the test component that accepts different names like John and Jill. Let's compare states and props. You cannot access or modify the state of a component outside of the component. Props, on the other hand, make components reusable by allowing a child to receive data from its parent. Components create and manage their own data with their state, whereas they receive data from outside with props. You use a state to manage data and props to pass data between components. You can modify state data within the component, but cannot access it outside of the component. Data from props is read-only. You cannot modify using another component. You can modify a state using the setState method, whereas you can only pass props from a parent component to a child in a unidirectional flow. In this video, you learn that a state is a JavaScript object that represents information about the component's current situation. The state allows you to create interactive components. Any changes in the state data cause the component to re-render. You use props to pass data between components in a unidirectional flow from parent to child. Components create and manage their own data with their state, whereas they receive data from outside using props.